Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BCS Coventry. This is our monthly meeting for March 2024. My name is Dr. Diana Basinkanta. I'm the chair for BCS Coventry. Our topic for today's meeting is digital social health care, and our speaker is Tommy Henderson Ray. Tommy is a registered social worker and as well as a social care digital engagement specialist at the NHS Transformation Directorate. He is the digital engagement program manager for NHS England. You're welcome, Tommy, and thank you for coming.
Brilliant. Well, delighted to be with you virtually, live from Sheffield, and really keen to talk to you this evening about what I'm doing and the role that BCS is playing in that. So please feel free to put questions in the chat as we go. So what I'd like to do is just explain a little bit about social care and technology and what that looks like, and the realities of that and the value of that, and also articulate and explain some of the journey that BCS has gone on as an organisation in terms of its thinking around social care, what it looks like, and its ambitions going forward. And that's linked to BCS's white paper on social care that I have curated, commissioned, and a subsequent communities of practice that exists with that. So the screen that you're looking at hopefully will say Transformation Directorate and what is social care. So what I wanted to do was talk about informatics in social care and dig a little bit into the slightly mystical term of what informatics means. I think it's quite an esoteric niche word that you probably wouldn't hear in everyday language in your supermarket or in the pub or at the school playground or wherever. It's a bit of an odd word, and I'm a firm believer that the essence of informatics is wholly applicable to social care, but it looks quite different. And so what I wanted to do was take us on a little bit of a journey without meaning to sound too dramatic this evening. So what I wanted to do is explain how I got to this point very briefly. Who am I? Then explain what is adult social care, because we can't really talk about informatics in social care until you know what the sector looks like, because then that starts to shape what informatics looks like. And then explain a little bit about the findings of the white paper and where we go from there as BCS. So hope that makes sense. Do tell me if that does make sense, and do tell me if that doesn't make sense. If any of you have presented to anyone at any time, if you're talking to what is effectively yourself on a screen, it can be a bit odd. So do express your existence at times. That would be very helpful for me, because I'm keen to talk about what's relevant to you in your situation as much as a generic presentation that I've got here. So I am a registered social worker. That is absolutely right. I've been working in social care for about 17 years. I've also worked for the NHS in acute care, as well as previously working for NHS Digital, and now I work in NHS England as part of the digitising social care programme. So I've been around, plenty of scars from working for local authorities, plenty of scars for working for the NHS, and plenty of scars of working for individual care providers. So I've been around, and ultimately my experience of technology myself has been pretty up and down. Lots of duplication of information, not much thought about the user at the end of it and the design of technology. And ultimately, as a social worker, you tend to be involved with people when there's a problem. In other words, none of us require the help of a social worker when life is looking good. You tend to need social work, social services, social care if things aren't going so well. And if technology is an inhibitor to the experience of care, the quality of care, the commissioning of care, the whole process, that is very unhelpful. And equally, you may well have social care experience yourself. You may well have families who are experiencing social care. And if you have navigated or dipped your toe, metaphorically, into the world of social care, you will realize it is remarkably complicated, underfunded, and misunderstood, which is not helpful if you need help, care, and support. So ultimately, I had two choices as a social worker. I could either become a very bitter and twisted and annoyed social worker about how technology was hindering my role, which is not very helpful for social work or anyone that you're working with, for that matter, or I could try and do something about it. So over a rather convoluted journey, I found myself in various roles nationally around policy and decision making that has led me to this point here, working for the government via NHS England in the Digitising Social Care programme. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I have a view on what life looks like for social care. So the reason I've put these slides together is that nobody really knows what social care looks like. It doesn't have a unique definition. And in the same way that the NHS is quite hard to quantify and looks very different, the same can be said of social care. It's not one thing, it is many, many, many disparate bits and pieces together, and it's slightly unquantifiable. So what I tried to do is create a slide deck that goes through that, and I will go through that will then give us the foundations to understand what we need to do when we're thinking about informatics and what BCS's role in that is and how we can fix that. I'm also on the health and care exec for BCS, and I am BCS's social care lead. So I'm also a BCS member. And I think BCS has a really key, important role to play in social care, but it has yet to realise that. But I think because it has a policy wing, it has a professionalisation wing, and it has an accreditation wing to it, I think that those are all eminently valuable themes for the social care workforce. Anyway, enough of that. So let me try and see if these slides will move on. Okay, so what is it, social care, this aloof concept that we don't quite know what it is? Well, in the same way that the health service covers paediatric care up to palliative care, the same can be said for social care. It's child protection, it's youth services, it's that transition between children's care to adults care, and it's end of life, and it's palliative care, it's community care, it's support, it's everything in between. So what does that look like? Think mental health services, think learning and disability support services, think about people who are vulnerable, needing care and support, safeguarding, fostering, community support, mental health, I've already said that, sorry, drug misuse support, homelessness, charities, and so on and so forth. It covers a massive range of organisations and styles. And adult social care specifically, which is the world that I frequent, looks a lot like organisations delivering through care homes, nursing homes, residential homes, and they're different from each other. Care in someone's own home, or home care, or often called domiciliary care, reablement services, where you often have a short-term package of care to get you back on your feet to what you were at as your baseline. Day services, supported living, community support, shared lives. Shared lives is where people who need care and support actually live in situ with families, so you share each other's lives. Substance misuse support, homelessness, transition from children to adults, and so on and so forth. So that's a very brief summary of what the organisations might look like in terms of their style and reasons for existence. And crucially, those organisations look very different from each other. So you could have those organisations being independent, private businesses. They could be statutory businesses, i.e. local authorities with statutory responsibilities in legislation. They could be charities, could be voluntary services. So all of those organisations and their structures are equally applicable as social care. Independent, private, voluntary, charity. So there's all number of different governance, values, money, finances, agility, all within that as an organization. So you can imagine the technology will look very different in a local authority compared to a residential care home, or a local authority compared to somebody who's in a shared lives placement. The technology will always look very different because they're different settings. They're both adult social care, but they look very different. And the local authority, the local government role in social care, as you will all be residents of local authorities in this country. So wherever you are in the country, your local authority will have a statutory obligation to signpost information and advice to you and its constituents, as they would call it, residents in your council, assess needs where they are required, and arrange short-term support. Think about safeguarding, and also, and you may notice this from your council tax contributions, that the local authority in each area has a significant role in shaping the market for the services that exist in that area. So I live in Sheffield, so Sheffield City Council has a huge job in making sure that there is enough provision out there for people who require care and support in the city or outside of the city. And crucially, and this came as a surprise to many, many people I worked with, NHS is not free. It is means tested. So it is not part of the NHS. It is intricately connected to the NHS, but it is not part, and it is completely separate too, which again, most people, that's an assumption. A lot of people don't realise that that is the case. So what is it? Social care is described as support for washing and dressing and eating and taking medication. But it's actually a lot more than that. And this is a quote from Richard Kramer, who is the CEO of Sense, and Sense are a visual aid charity. It's about supporting people to flourish, living independent, enjoying lives, trying activities, developing friendships, and being part of society and living fulfilling lives. It's actually a whole different set of skills in order to achieve those points that he's made there than just a time, task, and finished based process that it can often be conflated with. So if you had 10 points at a glance that you can have up your sleeve for your next pub quiz, on any given day, there are at least 10 million people in England alone that are affected and receiving care and social care, which is a phenomenal amount of people. Social care as a sector employs more people than the NHS, 1.6 million at the moment, and it contributes £50.3 billion to the economy, and that's the figure from 2022. And it probably comes as no surprise, but care needs are increasing, but the extent of care that's given is decreasing. It's not free, it's means tested. It is very complex because there are lots of organisations doing different things in different ways in different spaces. And it is at breaking point financially. It has never seen reform in the way that the NHS had, good or bad, and it has not seen replicable levels of funding that the NHS has. And you can argue what the NHS has done with its money could be good or bad. That's for another discussion for another time. There isn't a voice of social care, or one voice. So in the same sense that you have NHS providers who will represent the voice of providers in the NHS, trusts, ICSs, and so on and so forth, or CCGs as they used to be, there is no such thing for social care. Well, there is, but there are lots and lots of different organisations who represent their patch. So there is no one voice. So you can't really hear a united voice of what social care says because it's so many different things. Children's and adult social care are very distinct and very different. So unlike the NHS, where care for a child is under the same governmental department as older people or adults, very different for social care. Children's and adults are split separately. And finally, I think on this slide, the point I would make is that social care is relevant to all of us. It might be relevant to you and your family right now, but it's relevant to us as a society, how we care for people who are vulnerable. It's relevant to our jobs around tech, because tech and social care is a very interesting and different space. And arguably, I would suggest that at some point in our lives, we all on this call may need social care. So if it's in a mess and we need it, it's relevant as to why. So to just bust a few stereotypes, social care is not just old people in care homes or a local authority, for example. And nearly half the people who receive care and support in social care, so that's nearly half of the 10 million, are working age adults. So I'm not sure of the demographic of those of you on the call, but those of you working, people who receive care and support might look just like you. Did you know that there are over 30,000 nurses working in social care, and nearly 300,000 people with learning disabilities or who are disabled of a working age are receiving care and support in social care. So the demographic of people in social care and what people look like is not just old people coming out of hospital. It's much, 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 much broader than that, as you can well imagine. So in fact, disabled people between 18 and 64 make up a third of long-term social care users. And actually, one of the things that's very interesting about social care and technology is the demographic of people who receive care and support long-term, i.e. with a physical disability at a young age or a learning disability at a young age. Neither that physical disability or that learning disability are going away. And if I'm 18 and I have autism, I may receive social care support at 18. The likelihood is I'm going to need that when I'm 80. So whereas as a patient, you may go to the NHS for your care as and when, periodically, like you or I would, in social care, that is a person who is in receipt of care and support for the entirety of their life. So that's a different demographic. It's a different dynamic, and therefore, if you think about the technology what that looks like is actually quite different as well. And I'll come on to that a little bit later on. I hope that makes sense. If anyone has any questions, please do say, and don't be shy. Nothing worse than shyness. And people are not patients because they're not in receipt of a health service. It's not a health model of care. It's a social care model. So it's people. We are people drawing on care and support. So it's not a medicalized model of care. The person themselves is the expert, and I'll come on to that later on as well. So what does it look like? This is just adult social care. This is not children's social care because that's a whole different bag. And I would need another hour of your time for that. And it's a sector I used to work in, but don't know anywhere near as well now. So I think this is an interesting snapshot. If you were to take a snapshot of the sector, what would it look like? The snapshot of the sector would look like you are a woman, you are delivering direct care, you're probably between 40 and 50, and you work as a carer. So the workforce in adult social care is very broad and very varied. Social workers, occupational therapists, nurses would be considered the clinical workforce within adult social care, apart from a few nuances here and there. But crucially, only 5% of the sector are what we would call clinical, i.e. registered with a professional body. Social workers, occupational therapists and nurses. The rest of the workforce are in all different kinds of guises. However, the majority of the workforce are carers delivering care. That could be care in a residential care home, nursing home, supported living setting, or delivering care in someone's own home through domiciliary or home care. And if you look at the pie chart on the top, or whatever chart is, I'm not really sure what you call that chart, it's not a pie chart. The top right, anyway, most of the sector is overwhelmingly independent. They are effectively businesses delivering care either through a contractual arrangement with their local authority or through a private arrangement between an individual and a family. Then you have local authorities in the NHS and direct payments that I'll come on to in a bit. So obviously the NHS and local authorities have a significant role to play in social care and its commissioning and marketing. However, the majority of social care happens in the independent care provider sector. And the pie chart, or whatever chart, the circular chart, one official term, is a more illustrative fact of that. So if statistically this comes from what was NHS Digital's data, which is now NHS England's data. This is a return from every local authority in England. There are 153 local authorities in England. This is a return from every local authority each year. Statistically, if you are 18 to 64, you're most likely to receive support through learning disability. However, at 64 years old, that shifts to 65 and older. So an older age adult is called 65 or over. So if you are 65 and over, I do apologise if you are then considered vicariously an older age person. Do forgive me. This is merely the stats, not me. You are under the guise of physical support. So that shifts significantly. Now, there are lots of reasons why that is, but the technology that sits alongside those two areas looks very different. But I think the point that's quite interesting to make is that technology in social care, the headlines are often grabbed around hydration prevention, falls prevention, and independence in later life prevention, which all leads to the bottom statistic there at 65% of physical support, whereas there's a significant proportion of our sector, and a significant proportion, more crucially, of people in society that are in our towns and cities and villages and neighbourhoods that we live in, who are receiving care and support under learning disability. It's an area that we don't talk about very much. It's an area that's not covered very much in policy. It's an area that doesn't get much headline other than negative. Yet people who with learning disability grappling and using technology is a very, very interesting space indeed. So if I was to describe social care in one slide, if there was one thing that you would take away as to what on earth this aloof concept of social care is, this would be the one slide I would urge you to have, is that social care is all of these things. It is both and statutory local authorities with statutory obligations under a number of different legislative frameworks. It's care providers delivering care privately through private arrangements and or commissioned from the NHS or local authorities or an integrated care system, ICS. It's also people on personal budgets. Personal budgets are people who are, let's take, for example, someone who's a working age adult who has a physical disability but is able to work full time. They may need support with personal care, shopping, administrative tasks, and support to socialise, particularly if they're wheelchair bound, as an example. Now, a personal budget would be where their needs are assessed and they are given funds per month to decide what they do with that money. That is their personal budget to spend on their care. They become the employer and they can employ people to support them and their care and support. There's a direct payment to them. So that's that manifestation of independence. And bottom right, this is probably part of social care that no one really knows because we can't quantify it, is that some of you on the call may have been, or maybe you are, unpaid carers. I'm an unpaid carer for my aunt with dementia, but you don't tick a box to say that you are. So as a government, as statistics and statisticians, we do not know how many unpaid carers there are in this country, but we reckon the current estimates are between 13 to 20 million people across this country are unpaid carers. So if you just take the higher end of that figure, can you imagine 20 million people as carers across this country? That would legitimately fall under adult social care, but there is no governmental department for unpaid carers. And there are a number of reasons why that is, but social care I would categorise as those 4 areas. Hope that makes sense. So the landscape in which it sits. So on the left-hand side, you will see there an integrated care system. Now, I don't know all of your backgrounds, whether you're health or non-health or wherever you work, but an integrated care system is a recently created entity, a statutory organisation that requires NHS, social services or local authorities in this instance, and voluntary care and third sector organisations to work together in their place, their areas of care, to deliver care. They're called integrated care systems, or ICS as their short abbreviation. So there are 42 across England, so they cover all different areas, from Lancashire and South Cumbria all the way down to Devon and Cornwall and everywhere in between. They will look very different depending on what they are. And as I said, there are 153 local authorities in England alone with statutory adult social care responsibilities. They could be county councils, metropolitan borough councils, or just councils. They have different names, but they effectively have a similar job. Those 153 local authorities feed into and contribute to those 42 ICSs. The 153 local authorities have a patch of, in their each individual area, of course, nearly 18,000 organisations. So if you're talking about the magnitude of scale, in essence, what I'm saying there is there are almost 18,000 individual organisations delivering on a daily basis care to people in residential settings or home settings or community centres and so on and so forth. And those 18,000 organisations may have sites across the country that are all over, some very big, some very small, but that culminates in nearly 40,000 individual sites delivering care across England alone. So when we talk about what is adult social care, imagine the scale of 40,000 individual organisations in different sites delivering care daily. It's everywhere, and it's hard to quantify, really. If I work in government and local government, this is my GCSE clip art version of what it looks like. So on the left-hand side, you have children's social care, which is responsible for the Department for Education. Conversely, on the right-hand side, you have adult social care, which is responsible for the Department for Health and Social Care. So I think if you were to design from scratch, you would not do this. Who in their right mind would split a sector across different governmental organisations? And equally, even more complicated, different regulators. So, for example, Department for Education are responsible for children's social care, and the regulator for children's social care is the same as schools, Ofsted. Adult social care is the governmental Department for Health and Social Care, and its regulator is the same as the NHS, CQC. So if I'm an organisation that delivers care for a 12-year-old and a 24-year-old, I have to be regulated by Ofsted and the CQC. I'm also responsible to the Department for Education and the Department for Health and Social Care, and potentially the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, or DLUC as it's called, and DSIT and any other governmental department. So we know that governmental departments don't talk very well to each other. So if I'm a person travelling through health and care from age 10 onwards up to being an adult, I transfer through this very bumpy patchwork, and it's a real mess. So what you could implement for a 17-year-old looks very different to what you could implement for a 21-year-old, even though their ages are very, very close in relative terms. So it's a very complex landscape for statutory adult social care. So the 153 local authorities, and their role is around commissioning. Yes, Dave, great to hear from you. Thanks, Dave. Yes, it's a nightmare, and I commend any organisation that does so, because people are connected not necessarily by age, but by need. So, for example, if you're a learning disability and autism organisation, people who are 16 may not necessarily have the age of 16 in terms of their ability and persona, and may well demonstrate similar behaviours to someone who's 25, who may demonstrate similar behaviours to someone who's 17. Legislatively, they fit across both sectors and both departments and both regulators. Yet, in terms of the 24-year-old's behaviour, that may well look very similar to someone who's 17. Yet the organisation has to contend with all of the assessments that come from different frameworks from different regulators. So it's really complicated. And that can really curtail the extent in which an organisation thinks about technology, because Ofsted may say one thing, whereas CQC say another. So if you know that one regulator is okay, but the other one's not, you face a whole myriad of complete day-to-day challenges in terms of implementation of that. And so for local authorities, one of the big challenges that I face in my job is talking to NHS organisations and helping them understand around social care. So, for an example, different technology that the NHS may implement, that it chooses to enact in its setting, in its place, and it will say to the local authority in its patch, can you use this as well, because this is interoperable, this connects to and talks to the system we would like to use. And one of the challenges we have with local authorities, and it's also a good thing, is that local authorities and the makeup of local authorities is actually intrinsically linked to politics. your councillors in your local authority who have a responsibility for adult social care are democratically elected through its constituents. So you will have, if you voted in your local elections, voted for a councillor, and that one of those councillors will have ultimate responsibility for adult social care, who will then hold social services to account. That could be Green, could be Labour, could be Lib Dem, could be Conservative, whoever that may be, they're going to have their own particular angle to that. So it's not always easy to implement technology because there is a political accountability angle to that. You can implement technology, of course you can, but what that looks like will be different depending on each local authority and each patch, depending on the democratic political narrative behind the scenes. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, let's come back to that one. So independent care, this is the 39,000 sites over nearly 18,000 organisations. That is manifest predominantly in two ways. Firstly, care in someone's own home. And secondly, residential care. Now, let's just talk about care in someone's own home. One of the reasons I think social care is quite misunderstood is that if most people receive care in their own home, you and I don't see it because it's a private arrangement between the person in receipt of care, wherever they may be in their own home, and the care agency delivering that care. You don't see it in the same way that you see ambulances coming in and out of hospitals, or hospitals and GPs and so on and so forth. It's in and out. It's not seen. It's a private arrangement. And that's rightly so, but we don't see it. So it's actually care in someone's home that is where the majority of the sector is at, not home care, sorry, not residential care or nursing care, although that's a close second. It's actually in someone's own home. And if you think about what technology you might use in your own home, in my home, not only have we got Wi-Fi, but I've got young children, so we've got Alexa, we've got Spotify, we've got Netflix, we've got all the streaming services. So we have things that are connected all together. You could have smart meters, you could have smart thermometers. If you're in receipt of care, there's no reason why you couldn't have that as well. So as a social care organisation, you might have to think about how you contend with these different things as well. And crucially, when we talk about independent care landscape, those organisations will look very, very different. So, for example, you can have some organisations that are ginormous, whose portfolio of delivery will cover the whole of England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, potentially Southern Ireland, and potentially mainland Europe as well. So if you imagine Bupa as an organisation, Bupa is well known. They have care homes across England, from the very, very north of England to the very, very south of England, and everywhere in between. They are a care provider, providing care. Huge organisation with huge governance, huge IT teams, huge commissioning, and so on and so forth. Conversely, you could have somebody who is running a home care agency from their living room, dining room, providing care for 5 or 6 different individuals on a very small scale, and may employ 2 or 3 people as carers. That could be a business and delivering care, both called care providers. One is tiny, one is a behemoth. Both are social care providers. So when we say social care providers, we do need to decide what type of social care providers we're talking about. And from a technology perspective, you can imagine the funds and reserves that a very, very big organisation has at its fingertips compared to the margins that a very, very small family-run, sometimes charity-based or faith-based organisation may have. And equally, if you don't have the knowledge about technology within your own organisation, where do you go to choose the right technology? So there's lots of things for us to consider when it comes to what tech looks like. Anyway, so this is about funding. So I'm going to be very brief for this one because it's a bit dry. Crucially, the key points here are, if you have assets over 23,500, you have to pay for your own care. So that's why the self-funder market is so prevalent in social care. As soon as your assets drop below 23,500, the local authority on the right-hand side will contribute to your care on a sliding scale, depending on how much money you do have. And if you look at the 2 green circles at the bottom, if I'm a care provider through a private arrangement, on average, I'm getting 650 quid a week. If the same care is received through a local authority, that on average is about 510 quid a week. So as a care provider, I'm out of pocket with local authority funded care than I am with private care. But if I live in an area or provide care in an area that's not affluent or quite poor, or there aren't very many private fee payers, I don't have much money, and I don't have a bottom line that's very conducive to innovation and technology. So therefore, can I afford to put any tech in place? Because I just simply haven't got enough money. Simply can't keep hold of staff. So what on earth can I do about technology? Because I need to keep afloat and keep this business going. Margins are really, really tight. Thank you, Stephen, for your message. I'll come to you in a minute. Direct payments. So I have briefly talked about that. So I'll leave that one there. So I'll just read your comments, Stephen. Being a consumer of social care, children and adults, since I became a parent 40 years ago, I can assume that dealing with multiple providers is a challenge. I'm also one of those up to 20-minute unpaid carers. Well, good to have you with us, Stephen. Getting known in the system helps, but there are times when you have to fight for your rights. There are times when you have to fight for your life, for your rights. It can be one of the most draining things, and technology can be a vehicle to articulate and amplify that story. But I would equally say that technology can be the bane and the barrier for sharing information. And I think fighting for what you need to know in order to provide the care you need to support your family with can be the biggest barrier in it all. And that can be wrapped up in information governance. I find that all the time. And multiple providers, multiple areas, multiple languages, multiple abbreviations, multiple attitudes, and openness to technology as well. So I wanted to just very briefly make a distinction between NHS and social care, because I think it's worth articulating why social care is not the NHS and why it's different. So on the left-hand side here, we have the NHS. Now, this is not completely and entirely the case, but in many cases it is. And there's nothing wrong with this, I must say. But point one, the knowledge flows from the clinician to the patient. Let's take, for example, see if hypothetically I have a knee problem, I go to my GP and I get a referral for physio. The physio has the knowledge as to what's wrong with my knee and will give me exercises over a period of time to help me rehabilitate my knee. The clinician, the physio, is the expert in that situation there, giving me knowledge as to how to improve my condition. And the clinician has the power. Nothing wrong with that at all. I have 3 children, all delivered through cesarean. There is in no way, shape, or form am I remotely capable of knowing how on earth to deal with a cesarean. So I want the clinician to have the knowledge and the power. I want them to be the expert, and I want them to tell me what's going on. I want my children to be safe in their hands. I want them to have the power. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But what I'm trying to make the point here is that when we talk about health and social care, that we need to understand the difference between the two, and why, in my opinion, social care being engulfed and being part of the NHS is not the answer to the solution at all. And this is why. It's because if we take somebody who's 20 years old, who's non-verbal, with profound learning disabilities and autism, they are in receipt of social care provision every single day. They are the expert in their care. They know their situation and their condition the best. What they need is an organisation and a workforce and people who understand them, to work with them, to help them have as great a quality of life as possible, to live as gloriously normal life as possible, as gloriously a mundane life as any one of us has. The person has the power. That's how it should be. That's the philosophical difference between the two. And I'm not suggesting in every instance that the NHS entirely holds the power and patients don't. I don't mean that at all, because it's not one or the other. What I wanted to do is make a distinction between the two so that we can begin to think about why it's not the same, and actually why being joined is good, but not engulfed and the same thing. We don't want I don't think we should have a homogenous thing. It should be different, but complementary to each other. They are two sides of the same coin. Again, hope that makes sense. So your top 10 takeaways. By the way, John, could you just give me a time? How long have I got left of the hour?
20 minutes.
20.
Yes.
Great, thank you. That's good. So top 10 takeaways. Think person, not patient. The best prevention tool the NHS has is called social care, but it's not a byproduct of the NHS, and it's not care homes, and it's not local authorities. Most people receive care in their own home. And 80% of social care referrals happen outside of the hospital setting. So it's not, in many ways, a lot to do with hospitals, but the hospital discharge takes a lot of the focus. So digital transformation, and this links to the BCS white paper, and we think about informatics and technology in general. Transformation in adult social care is widespread. It's happening on a rapid scale and on a mass scale, but it looks very, very, very different. And it looks unique depending on the audience you're talking about. So it could look like transformation that's commissioner led from a local authority saying, we will provide telecare, assistive technology across our region to organisations that need it. We hold the purse strings. We see this as a public health benefit. We see this as a commissioning benefit, and we see this as a cost-saving benefit. We see this as a preventative benefit. We will implement this. That could be one way of it being manifest. Number two, I could be a private individual organisation that has some reserves, has won some money from somewhere, has money from somewhere, who knows. I could say I'm going to invest in technology that looks like sensors so that I can really support people to understand their patterns and rhythm of daily life. So I know best to support that individual in a personalized way. You could think about technology that really helps understand hydration when people really need hydration, when they don't need hydration. What about wearables? People walking around independently within a setting, and understanding where people are at any given time, particularly if there's capacity issues, whether they're 20 or 85, whatever age they are. If there's capacity issues around cognition and awareness and the mental capacity, what about wearables to understand heart rate, blood levels, and where people are? What about interconnected devices where you can share information from one system to another that informs the ultimate care that an organisation is delivering? And what about the data that they're capturing and understanding that? A, for business models, B, for commissioning, and C, for the regulator. And what about number three? I could be an individual, or I could be, let's take Stephen, your example, you are a carer just like me, and it might be that in our setting we think, do you know what, the person we're caring for could really benefit from a little alarm on the fridge, because they keep forgetting to close the fridge and everything becomes, or the freezer, and everything becomes defrosted. Can we put a little alarm on the fridge to just remind people? Or someone with autism who wants to have a shower. This sounds a very bizarre example, but it's a really good one. Could you buy a shower where the shower turns from colour blue when it's cold to red when it's hot, knowing that that person is really triggered by a really cold shower, but they love a hot shower? Could you implement some technology where the shower goes red so that person knows color-wise that they can go in and have a shower without having some sort of really high behavioral challenge because it was a cold shower? Really obvious to those of us with no learning disability, but if you have a learning disability, you're contending with that. So you've got an individual thinking about what care could you put in, what Internet of Things, how do I recruit someone to provide that care for me or someone I care for? How do I communicate with somebody who has no ability to communicate using words? Or what technology can we use to ascertain how someone's feeling about any given care that they're receiving on that day? How do we exercise choice and control? So the agility of organizations to think about that is really interesting. And so technology-wise, there is an increasing wave of organizations who are thinking about, well, how do we bring technology with me? So, for example, my parents are in their early 70s, and in 10 years' time, however many years' time, they may require social care support. They use Spotify, Netflix, they WhatsApp video, they've got Alexa, Sky TV, smartphones, the lot. Not uncommon for any of us to have those things. When they move potentially into social care settings, are they then going to say all of those 6 things, oh, we don't need those anymore? Well, they want to bring the tech with them. So digital transformation looks like, how do organizations then adapt to people going, oh, yeah, but I brought this with me. Can I have this because it's intrinsically linked to my care? There are challenges around digital transformation. You can't afford to get it wrong because there's not enough money in the sector. And different parts of the country have different connectivity challenges, different workforce challenges. Are there enough people to actually do the job? And different regulators, different commissioners ask for different things. So if I'm an organisation, I think, where do I know to start with this? And what does the future look like? People want to bring their tech with them. I think the green tech agenda is going to raise higher and higher. I think social care data as a whole will become more and more valuable because it's holistic about the person. And I think people, as consumers of care, will say, I don't care if it's a GP, if it's a social care provider, if it's a local authority, if it's the NHS, if it's a dietitian, if it's a physio, if it's speech and language therapy, if it's an occupational therapist, I don't care who it is. I want them to know about me, what they need to know to deliver that care. And it's up to you to organise how you do it. And I think that agenda will rise and rise and rise and rise as time goes on. So the IT systems, policies, and organisations that support that are going to have to keep up to that, which is a real challenge. So the white paper tries to capture some of those things. So if I pause for a second and just say that, so I was explaining some of this to BCS and they were acknowledging that there was a gap in where BCS fit. So what I asked them to do was commission a white paper, and we consolidated lots of literature and interviews from significant key leaders across health and care, particularly social care in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, to talk about the benefits and what the challenges were and opportunities for leveraging adult social care data, which is all captured through technology, of course. And we wanted to inspire people who work in adult social care or who potentially could consider social care in adult social care an area to work in as a possibility. As digital, and I'm interested in digital, I have compassion, maybe social care is for me. Think of it as an inspirational place to work. And understanding that the workforce and the people drawing on care and support are actually at the heart of anything that happens with transformation. And so the question was, what could that white paper look like? What would informatics look like for social care? And what does BCS's role look like? So we wanted to try and get a snapshot as to what is happening today with digital and data within adult social care. And that will obviously, as you will perhaps have guessed from the previous slides, will look very different depending on the size of the organisation, whether you're a local authority, whether you're independent, whether you're a charity, and actually the type of care that you deliver. If you're delivering care for an older person, will look very different for a younger person, and if you're delivering care in a home, will look very different if you're delivering in multiple people's homes at any given time throughout the day. And we wanted to sort of trigger and motivate a discussion amongst different social care organisations, professional bodies, FedIP, BCS, Soccertim, and others, and governmental bodies in England and Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, to think about, well, what are the opportunities for digital in social care and what should we be considering, given that people are using technology all the time. We wanted to build a community of practice for people and identify people who have an interest in this space, who want to connect and feel connected and share good and bad, so that can ultimately inform what BCS's offer and how it positions itself to complement social care, and to begin to engage in that transformation idea with different organisations. So the focus areas for the white paper were these 4 areas. The value of digitising care records. What data can be captured within a digitising care record and what value that brings to the person drawing on care and support. What does that mean for the workforce who are delivering care? What does that mean for the organisations who are responsible for that, and what does that mean for policymakers who are thinking about what they should do to support social care. Capturing that information is always going to be really hard if everyone's records are paper-based. Whereas if we can start to capture and articulate some of the benefits of records being digitized, that accelerates the digitization integration agenda. It becomes the vehicle for information being able to be shared across different organizations in some way or other. It's not going to solve that problem immediately, but it certainly begins the journey. We discussed the concept of informatics as a word and what that means. And the summary to that was that informatics is a very problematic word for people who work in social care. It's a word that's not recognized. It's a word that doesn't mean anything. And it's a word that is lost. Yet we know that from the intel and literature review that we did, we know that informatics is front and center to what's happening in social care. The challenge then becomes language. So that became clear for BCS is how do we ensure that we can provide and connect membership offers to people who work in what one might call informatics, yet at the same time don't necessarily call it that? How can we make sure that we connect people? And I think that stems back to the community of practice that we are starting. One of the key themes in the white paper is also talking about how tech supports the sector. And some of the previous slides will have alluded to that, is that technology, if we do it right, is the amplifier for people's story. It tells us what's going on. It tells us of the great examples of where technology can really add value to people's experiences of care, whether that's a shared care record and different organizations from different settings feeding into that, so that wherever a person is in their health and care journey, they can their information goes with them, as it were, a passport, so that the care that's delivered is knowledgeable. And there are lots of examples of where that doesn't work, and that's probably most people's experiences. However, there are beacons of examples where it is working much better. So the white paper digs into much more detail as to, well, how did that happen and what value is happening as a result, and how could that be exponentially rolled out in other areas as a result, and using that as a good practice. And finally, what does the data tell us? What does it say about mental health services? What does it say about people with long-term care? What does it say about the state of support in residential and nursing home? What does it say about people who are receiving care in their own home? And what can we learn from that? And our conclusions were quite wide-ranging, but this is the one focus that I wanted to pick out for you as a group today, is that investment in digital transformation is a really worthwhile endeavour, both for government and BCS, but the individuals themselves and the organisations that deliver it, and commissioners of support services. With a workforce of over 1.5 million, the opportunity for BCS and other organisations to add value to the sector is massively significant. And there is a massive role for BCS to play in terms of nurturing digital leaders in social care. And they play an integral role as to what digital transformation looks like. The workforce that are empowered with digital skills plays an integral role into what good technology looks like. So therefore, BCS and other professional bodies are ideally placed to support and empower individuals in this space. And we know that navigating that is really complex. And if you haven't got digital leaders, then the digital revolution will happen anyway, and it will be led by other people, may well be the suppliers of the technology themselves. And that's fine to a degree, but if the ultimate aim of the supplier is to create a profit, is it profit over people? So there is definitely a role of helping navigating the complexities to a large number of services and providers that are both private and public. So that is pretty much the end of it. I just wanted to give you those takeaways, that there are some hyperlinks that I've put in here that you can have a look at afterwards. I'm more than happy to share these slides. And the community of practice is up and running. And I don't know if you experience this with BCS yourself, but I know from working with BCS is that as a BCS member, trying to communicate with other BCS members as a non-BCS member of staff is a nightmare. So BCS doesn't really know who in its membership profess an interest or professional alignment with social care. Doesn't know. So we don't know within the BCS membership who is interested in social care, and therefore, by extension, who within BCS would be interested in joining our community of practice. So the community of practice is up and running, and we've had one session already in London, and we plan on having our next session in Wales, and then in Scotland, and then back to England again. So I'd be really keen to see if anybody's interested in that community of practice and hearing a bit more of what it looks like and what we've discussed thus far. And equally, if you have any reflections or questions from that barrage of information that you will have received over the last 45 minutes or so. So I'd like to open the floor to those of you and tell me what you think. Anything that surprised you, anything that you didn't know that you know now, and any reflections you have.
Thank you very much. Something, yeah, we are hearing your Mr. Tam, your network is breaking. I think a lot we need to like shout more praises for him because he did a nice job a day before. Oh, Samuel is just joined while everyone, yeah, we need to give him the accolade because he tried a day before and then still coming and then at least being in control with Paul. Like he really tried. Now wow, this is all for you. Sam.
I don't think that was for this meeting.
I was trying to find the thread in that question and then realised it wasn't a question. So yeah. Oh yes. So Naomi, you asked a question around for the slide. Who receives support in adult social care? Can you explain what the legends on the graph represent? Yes, I can. That's a very good question, and it's quite lazy of me because I just assume that everyone else understands what I'm talking about. So the categories, if you were 18 to 64, that was under sensory impairment. So in other words, you have problems with your eyesight, and that impedes your ability to live independently. So you need care and support because you have poor eyesight. Mental health would be that you have a diagnosed mental health condition problem that is your the reason that you are receiving support and care in adult social care. That could be anything from learning disability, autism, schizophrenia, paranoia, depression, and so on and so forth. Cognition would then fall into the category of dementia in all its forms, Alzheimer's, mixed dementia, Lewy bodies, and so on and so forth. Physical support is, as it says on the tin, and then learning disability is, as it says on the tin, and then so those are the more detailed breakdowns of those. Those are categorized through local authorities. So when somebody is requiring care and support from a local authority and they commission the care, the local authority has a duty statistically to say where and why that person needs care. What is the root of that care? And the root of that care is what's defined there is there. So those are the categories. There are other categories that could be used, but those are by far and away the big ones. So sensory impairment, mental health, cognition, which is different from mental health in terms of Alzheimer's and dementia, physical support, and learning disability. So I hope that answers that question, Naomi. And Dave, you want to join? Oh, we'd be delighted to have you. Sorry, I meant the 0 to 6. We could take that offline, David. Tell you what, if I put my email address in the chat, if you'd like to email me, we can have a chat and then work out what that looks like for you.
So Tommy, I've got a question. On one of your slides, you indicated that that adult social care contributes 50.3 billion pounds to the English economy. Is that
Yes.
annually? And I mean, I don't know if you could expand on that, considering the fact that the way adult social care is presented is that it's an expenditure part of the budget. I mean, if you look at I don't know if you receive your council tax later, it says, well, there's an increase in adults. Maybe most councils will spend 66 or 71.1% of their annual budget on adult social care.
Well, I think it's, if you think about how many people it employs,
yes,
that will be a significant part of that. What I will do is the link where it came from, a ridiculously long link. Skills for Care are a government arm's length body. It was their statistic.
Okay, thank you.
But yes, it's a really good point, actually, because the narrative that you get from the press is that social care is a problem, and it's a problem to be solved. For example, the Lib Dems have recently this week talked about can we get a coalition on social care? Can we get all parties to put their manifesto for social care on the table to work out what's best for people? Now, in some ways, that is quite a political move. Of course it is. Nonetheless, I think the key thing that I would say is social care is a sector that's worth financially investing in. It's something that has profound benefits to our workforce. There are significant challenges. There is nearly 150,000. So there's 152,000 vacancies on any given day across social care. So it's really problematic, But it's of great value economically to the government and to society to change it. But that's a longer term vision, and that's always a challenge for government, isn't it? It's long term visions. So yes, do feel free to have a look at that link, because that's where that statistic comes from.
I will. Thank you. All right. Is there any other question for Tommy?
I've just understood Naomi's question in more detail. Okay. I'll find the statistics as to what the 0 to 6 actually corresponds to. It's a very good question, Naomi. Yes. So I'll find the stat for that, because that's in NHS England's social care analytics. So let me find that. That's a good question. Thanks. I understand what you mean now. Sorry. Yes. Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, you said that you're going to make the slides available, did you? Or did I misunderstand?
Yes. Yeah. More than happy to share. Yeah. No problem.
Okay. Thanks. So is it okay if I publish it on the BCS branch website? Or what?
I don't have a problem it being on the BCS website personally. There's nothing contentious in here. It's all statistically correct.
Okay, so you don't mind if somebody borrows one of your slides to use for something else?
No. Steal with pride.
Okay, cheers. Thanks.
I'd just like to add a thank you, because in the past 8 months, I've had to deal with the death of an aunt in Yorkshire. I had my uncle put in a care home 150 miles away, disposed of the property. My mother's gone to a care home simultaneously, and my brother has gone into adult social care. He should have been diagnosed with learning difficulties, but he's now in his late 50s, and it's the that's a very useful overview. I've learned the hard way.
You have, Adrian, sounds like, yeah.
Life's taken a heck of a turn, but it's yeah, the facilities and support that the care system give aren't as widely understood, I think, as people actually. It's not so common knowledge, and there's phenomenal work done behind the scenes to support the care system, which is just not acknowledged as it ought to be.
No, thank you for sharing that, Adrian. That's really pertinent. So the two things that come to mind is that your phrase "learning the hard way" is so true. So people don't realise the value that social care brings to society as a whole until they need it, and then when they need it, either they themselves or their family, they realise what a mess and under-resourced it is, and that's profoundly unfair if you're in an episode in your life or family's life that involves crisis or stress. It's just not fair. And as an example, we know that a support worker in the NHS versus a support worker in social care, there's a disparity of 36% in their wage. So in other words, if you're a support worker in the NHS, you will earn per year 36% more than a care worker doing a very similar, if not the same job in social care. Why is that the case? Well, there are many reasons why that's the case, but that's just not fair. That's not fair. So if you are a person and your family are then relying on the sector, you're relying on a sector that's running on a 36% financial deficit at a job rate, which is comparable to the NHS. So yes, thank you for sharing that. And there are lots and lots of challenges that governments previously have shirked, current government have currently shirked, and we will remain to see whether future governments will take on the mantle or not, really.
Yep. Thanks for all you're doing. I'm surprised at the amount of charitable support as well. It's again unsung heroes supporting the care workers. And I've had a steep education on, yes, you can call people social workers, but my God, there are quite a variety, almost a rainbow of a complete spectrum of different types of social workers,
Yes.
which has been quite an education. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Adrian.
Don't know if you've seen Dr. Jeremy Murray's asked a question.
Oh no, I haven't. Sorry, I didn't. When you say is PC getting more traction, what does PC? What you mean PC? Oh, preventative care. Sorry, is preventative care getting more traction? Oh, that's a very good question, Jeremy. Preventative care is getting more traction if it's linked to the NHS, is my answer to that. And what do I mean by that? If social care can provide technology in a preventative way that is linked to or measurable to of benefit to financial cost savings to the NHS, then yes, it's getting more traction. So I'll give you an example. So the onset of technology around falls prevention is rife across adult social care, particularly in local authority in terms of their commissioning and in terms of care providers implementing technology around falls prevention. And the reason being is that preventative care around falls is really good for the person themselves. And we know that people who have falls in older age struggle to recover quickly, and that has profound impacts on their quality of life. But secondly, if you can implement technology that prevents or reduces falls in a preventative nature, that reduces the cost and likelihood and frequency of ambulance call-outs. It reduces the burden on hospital beds, and it reduces the strain on discharge back to care settings. If you can measure that, which you can to a degree because it involves NHS, then what you can do is you can say, well, instead of the NHS using that money, that cost saving that we can evidence through preventative care, you will use in social care as a preventative tool. So the risk is that social care becomes a preventative sector to stop the NHS hemorrhaging money through hospitals. So preventative care is gaining more traction because it is able, the NHS is able to articulate preventative care through those means. Virtual wards is another example of that. Is that fair and a true representation of what adult social care looks like as a whole? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think working age adults and people who are in long-term care who may interact with the NHS in the same way that you and I do, ad hoc, if there's an illness and not if they don't. But preventative care in that area is, and the risk is that you then attract industry and business and funding, and policy is then shaped according to where the preventative agenda is. And so therefore policymakers, government, money and society then conflate social care being the Cinderella preventative service to stop hospitals experiencing, well, not to stop, but to at least reduce the challenge that they have as hospitals. So yes, it's getting more traction, but only in certain areas. Does that make sense, Jeremy? I'll take the no answer as okay, maybe.
Is there any other question for Tommy? All right. Thank you very much, Tommy. We really this session was really informative, and thank you for all you're doing as well. Not just in your day job, but for what you're doing within BCS as well.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Can we give Tommy a round of applause? Anyhow you want to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Dolly.